So I was about to get some CCNA studying done, and I decided to share this little tidbit with you guys. Over the next 4 months, I am going to be logging 484 hours of CCNA study. In order to log this 484 hours, I would need to complete an ambitious 8 hours worth of studying every day. Now, the reason I'm doing this is to force myself into what Cal Newport calls in his book, So Good, They Can't Ignore You, the craftsman mindset. And I think it's a mindset that is missing in this day and age from a majority of people these days. And I think that the average person can do well with adapting the craftsman mindset, especially in the IT world. What I'm seeing in the IT world is just a bunch of people getting a bunch of certifications, which is not bad, and I'm not trying to be snarky or anything like that, but I see a lot of people getting a bunch of certifications, but it seems as if the skills are lacking. And I personally don't want to be one of those people. I don't want to be paper certified in any way, shape, or form. I want to know that when I get a certification, I actually know what I'm talking about. And the reason why I think it's important for me to know what I'm talking about or know what I'm doing with regards to the skills that these certifications certify is because I want to provide value to whichever company or whichever community I'll be serving. This is important because in this day and age, it's so easy to forget that in order to have a successful career, you have to serve other people. You have to be able to provide value to other people. You can't just think, oh, what can I get out of this relationship? Or what can I get out of this transaction, right? And it's very easy to get into that mindset or to fall victim to that mindset. And that mindset is what Cal Newport calls the passion mindset. And if you haven't already, you should read his book, So Good They Can't Ignore You. It's a really good book. I just picked it up, and it's really shifted my mindset when it comes to how to build a rewarding career. Even though I had hints of it when I was in my other career, which I was a union steward for about 6 years, this book really puts it into focus, right? It puts into focus how to build a rewarding career in a practical way. Now, I know it might sound counterintuitive, right, to be practical about your career, because if you're practical about your career, that means that you are, providing utility. And if you're providing utility, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to enjoy what you're doing. And Cal Newport brings up a point in his book, the self-determination theory, which is a concept built by or put forth by psychologists that basically say that in order to enjoy your career, or in order to enjoy whatever you're doing, you need to meet 3 basic needs: autonomy, competence, and relatedness. And I'll dive into how that relates to CCNA, IT certifications, and building a rewarding career right now. So autonomy means that you get to perform your role without any oppressive micromanagement, right? And competence simply means that you are competent in the skill that you are delivering, whether it's to a client that you have from a business, or if you're an employee somewhere, you got to be competent. And funny enough, the more competent you are, the more autonomy you can negotiate, because if you can prove that you are good at what you do and you are even excellent or master level at what you do, you can negotiate a high level of autonomy, whether it's within a employment role or whether it's in an entrepreneurship capacity, right? And relatedness is a form of connection. You want to have connection with the people that you're working with. More often than not, people try to make it seem as if being connected to the people that you work with is not something that's relevant when building a career, but it actually is. You want to be able to work with people that are like-minded, that are competent, that know what they're talking about. Even the fact of the matter is that you want to work with people that are good at what they do, that are friendly, and all of these things matter, right? So those are the three basic ways that you can ensure that you build a promising career. And how is this relevant to CCNA and IT certifications? Again, I think that when you get a certification, you want to make sure that the skills that are being certified are skills that you actually possess and can serve at a high level, at a high caliber, so that you can be compensated accordingly. And compensation doesn't necessarily mean that it's a monetary compensation. It means that you're satisfied, maybe even happy with what you do. And an important point in Cal Newport's book, So Good They Can't Ignore You, is that the better you get at something, the more time you spend at doing something, the happier you are, the more you learn to love it. Now, this is kind of like in contrast. He makes a point that this is in contrast to the passion mindset. And the passion mindset is strictly what something can do for you. And again, we fell victim to this mindset, especially us millennials. We've fallen victim to this mindset because we have so much opportunity in the world with regards to all of the social networking tools, all of the connections we have at our disposal. And it's in stark contrast to the generation before us who, the 9 to 5 was typically the only way to provision, or it was pushed as if it was the only way to provision because so many people were doing it. There weren't as many entrepreneurs as there are now, and it seemed like the way to go was to get a 9 to 5, do that for 30, 35 years or more, and collect a pension, Social Security, and all that stuff, and then keep it moving. In our generation, the millennial generation, which the job market is, significantly comprised of, we tend to try to relate our career with enjoyment. If we're not enjoying what we're doing, if we don't love what we do, we don't want to do it. And I was part of that mindset too. I was part of that school of thought as well, even though what I used to do wasn't something that, when I began, it wasn't something that I thoroughly enjoyed. It was a means to an end, right? I had just graduated and it was around the recession, and I said, you know what, look, let me do this because it's a means to an end. But the ironic part about it is, as I got better at it, I started to enjoy it more. And I noticed, looking back on it within the lens of So Good They Can't Ignore You by Cal Newport, I was becoming more competent in my role, which gave me more autonomy. And the role was naturally very people-oriented as well. I was serving people, and that made it even more enjoyable. So I had all three of those basic needs met on a consistent basis for 6 years. I was at that company for 9 years, but I was in a leadership capacity, in the leadership role for 6 of those 9 years. And I noticed that I had a decent, great actually job satisfaction until it was time for me to move on from that role. So back to the CCNA, right? And why I'm doing this 484-hour challenge. I think it's important for me. I don't know about you guys. It's important for me to build solid skills so that I can replicate that same level of job or career satisfaction that I had in my last role, right? And this is a pattern. This is a pattern that you can probably see with pretty much anybody who enjoys what they're doing. And on the outside, it might seem that they've followed their passion, but maybe they just gotten really good at what they did over the years. You know, maybe it wasn't they got into it because they loved it, right? They might have gotten into it because it was practical, you know? And one of the things that Cal Newport talks about in his book is Steve Jobs and how it's the way that he tells the story is like Apple, you know, the phone that I'm recording on right now, the company that makes the phone that I'm recording on right now, was something that happened as how it was birthed was something that happened as a result of, you know, Steve Jobs needing to make some money, right? And, you know, not necessarily because he loved technology or whatever the case may be. And I found that story to be interesting. I don't know how accurate the story is from Cal Newport's perspective, but I trust Cal Newport enough to actually see where the relevant points are being made with regards to that story, right? So again, the funny part is about this is, you know, I'm lucky to actually enjoy IT. I'm actually lucky to enjoy network engineering and learning all this stuff. But then Cal Newport made me question why I love it in the first place. Because as early as I can remember, my dad put me onto technology. He was a systems engineer and he put me onto technology, and I was learning all about network engineering. I was learning how to configure wireless access points, switches, you know, nothing too configuration heavy. It was just a lot of GUI stuff, you know, graphical user interface stuff. It wasn't nothing where I was sitting in a command line and, you know, but even so, I started out using MS-DOS. My mom brought home some computers that were running MS-DOS, and I started out fooling around with command line stuff, playing Snake on MS-DOS. And, you know, it was this thick ass book that I had to go through to find, I think, different features, different games, including Snake. I think Solitaire was on there, I'm not really sure. But I got introduced to computers at a very early age and network engineering as a result of my dad being a systems engineer. And I was wondering, thinking back in terms of Cal Newport's book, So Good They Can't Ignore You, if I actually enjoy this stuff because I have an affinity for it. And even if I have an affinity for it, why do I have an affinity for it? Is it because it was just introduced to me early on? Or is it because I enjoy this because someone put me onto it, or my parents put me onto it early on, and I just gotten real good at it over the course of the years? And funny enough, I gotten good at it and engineering topics in general always really, you know, I always gravitated towards these topics to the point where I started getting bored. I started to shift to the passion mindset. Let me find something else to do. Let me see what else I'm attracted to, which is psychology, you know, and marketing and other things, right? And eventually I ended up coming back to it because I want to engage in something that provides a high level of skill and a high level of value. Not saying that marketing and psychology doesn't do that, but I gravitated back towards this, and I want to build the necessary skills for it. So I don't know, that's my little vlog rant for today. Essentially, I really don't dig the passion mindset anymore. And oh, how am I going to accomplish this 484-hour goal? The point of this is to try, right? But what I'm going to do is I'm going to break those 8 hours a day up into 2 segments, 4 hours in the morning, 4 hours at night. Yesterday, I was really ambitious and I did 8 hours straight, 2 hours worth of reading the textbook and 6 hours worth of labbing. And I was working on static routing, static default routing. I did a little bit of NAT, which I wasn't able to really grasp the concept of, but I was able to configure a 3-router setup, 3-router, 3-switch setup, where I did static routing. I configured serial WAN links. I also, what else did I do? I configured internet access from my ISP on one of my routers, which I call router one generic name. And what else did I do? That's really all that I did, but I made sure that I implemented basic good practices of drawing out the topology before I even touched the CLI or even started putting wires into routers and switches and stuff like that. And I took a lot of notes on what I did. Even the command lines, I documented everything in the command line interface, all of the correct commands that I put in. I even in some areas documented where I went wrong in certain command line interface configurations. So essentially, what I'll be doing is breaking the hours up into 2 segments. And if I'm feeling good and ambitious that day, maybe I'll do longer stints. But generally, what I do is I use something called the focus timer, and I'm probably going to include a picture right here. And the focus timer is an app on the iOS, available in the App Store. I think it's probably available in Android too, I don't know. But the focus timer uses a Pomodoro style of, uses the Pomodoro technique, right? Where you're able to break your study sessions or your focus sessions up into predefined increments, whatever works for you. And then you can just break them up into, you can break your sessions up into long sessions and I think long breaks. And then you can do like little group goals, right? So how I configured it is I have 30-minute increments and in 4 sets. So I have 4 sets of 30, which makes for one whole session, right? That's 4 hours, right? That's 4 hours worth of studying. That's one whole segment of studying, which gives me 4 hours. And then later on, I'll do another 4 sets with, of course, the breaks in between. And I'll have my 8 hours for the day. And the focus timer allows for me to track the amount of time that I spent studying. And this is going to make it easier for me to keep track of my 484-hour goal that I want to reach by December 31st. So yeah, that's pretty much what I'll be doing. You know, I want to make sure that I actually build these skills for CCNA, network engineering, and all that stuff, so that I can provide a high caliber of service to whoever I serve, whether it's in an employment capacity or an entrepreneurship capacity. So, I mean, if you guys want to do this challenge too, I highly recommend downloading some sort of app where you can track your progress, where you can track your hours, and you know, you just got to stay the course. I gotta make sure that I stay off of social media. I gotta make sure that or at least limit social media as much as possible, because I like the people that I talk to on social media, and just pretty much make sure that this is a high priority. Of course, it's a high priority because it's gonna be 8 hours of my day that I spend doing this, and I just got to figure out how to balance it with everything else that I'm doing. So I'm making this part of the video about 5 or 6 hours after I recorded the material for the first part of this video that you're currently watching. I was on a walk just now and I had a thought. I just came back from configuring a Cisco lab that I was working on. So basically, I was working on configuring a 3-router, 3-switch setup with hosts on each switch and static routes, static serial WAN links, if you will, and configuring internet access from each router. I hope I'm making sense. So I did this big configuration, which I'll record a video on in the next week or so. And I thought to myself, I'm glad I documented or am documenting everything that I'm doing, not just in video format, but in word pads and notepads and on my computer, right? So my process is this. Before I start configuring anything on any Cisco equipment, I write out a topology. I draw up a topology. This is a good best practice for network engineering, because when you go to work for a company or you're serving a client or something like that, you want to draw up a nice blueprint and leave it for the next engineer coming after you, because it'll make it easier for them to troubleshoot the network if something goes wrong with your design. And it'll make it easier for them to redesign anything that they need to redesign, right? So I was on a walk just now and I was thinking about all of this. I was thinking about how I think it's a great idea for us to do these projects and to document what we're working on, because it creates a portfolio. It creates some sort of series of references and a timeline for the things that we're developing, for the projects that we're developing. And I'm seeing, again, I'm commenting on this a lot because I think that this is a fatal flaw of a lot of us going into the IT field. A lot of us are stacking certifications and essentially making them meaningless without projects under these certifications. I can only imagine that employers will interview people and, see all of the certifications and everything, but they also want to know what projects we've been working on. They want to know what's in our portfolio, how we applied the knowledge within the certifications that we've been working so hard to get. So I would highly advise you, if you're working on any projects, to meticulously document everything that you're doing. If it's a project where, like myself, I'll use myself for example. You probably saw in an earlier video, I was simply connecting 3 routers together, right? I wasn't bothered with hooking up the switches to the routers or anything. I just wanted to connect the 3 routers together via the serial WAN links and call it a day right there. I wanted to be able to ping across from router 1 into router 2, and ping across from router 1 into router 3, and from router 3 into router 1, and router 3 into router 2, and so on and so forth. So I documented that project, wrote that out, and the project that I did today, I simply just built on top of the previous project, right? And it makes things a lot more easier to learn, because you're building on one concept after the other. And it's just something that I'm not hearing a lot about. Maybe people are documenting, but within the realm of network engineering, I think that it is particularly important for us to draw up our documentation, to create nice blueprints so that we can get into the practice of doing it in a real world scenario, whether it's for, an employment opportunity or an entrepreneurship opportunity where you're going to be serving your own clients. So that's just all I wanted to really talk about. It's really important that we show and prove, and not just, remember a bunch of things and long enough for us to get certifications and then become, paper certified in a lot of the courses that people are getting, or a lot of the topics that a lot of people are working on, right? So that's all I really have to say. Document your work and create a nice little portfolio like I'm doing, and you'll be good to go. It's validating because you get to look in your files or look in your notebooks or what have you, and you see how far you came. I remember just being happy to set up my home network with vendor agnostic gear, right? Like I have an edge router hooked up to a TP-Link switch, which is hooked up to another TP-Link switch. Like, it was just so exciting just to start there. But it's even more exciting now that I'm using vendor specific equipment, the Cisco stuff, and configuring it, being able to ping across into other networks on my whole Cisco lab, and then being able to get internet access. And another thing, Wendell Oldham said something very profound in his textbook when in the introduction. When I first started reading the introduction to the textbook, I thought, oh my gosh, this is such a long road because the textbook is this thick. And he said something interesting about network engineers, or Cisco network engineers. He basically said that being a Cisco engineer or a network engineer, and I'm paraphrasing, I hope I'm not getting this wrong, but he said being a network engineer is having all of the pieces to a puzzle and missing one piece, and having to fashion that last piece out of our imagination. And this is what I actually encountered in my lab today. I wanted to get all 3 routers in my Cisco lab internet connectivity, right? I wanted all of my routers to have their own way onto the internet, so that each device can, or each host in each subnet is able to access the internet from their default router. And I was just thinking to myself, how am I gonna do this? So I had to create, and you're gonna see in the next video that I do on this lab, I had to create some sort of scenario out of a leftover switch that I had from another network that I was working on months back, and make it all work, right? So you're gonna see the details when I post about it in my next video. But it was so fun to come up with a solution to a problem that I encountered in the lab. And this is what makes having the equipment and working on projects so valuable. You're able to fix these issues. You're able to come up with solutions out of your imagination, go off script, not follow every little thing that's in the textbook or every little thing that you picked up on the internet somewhere, and come up with your own solutions. And I think this is where the value of the craftsmanship mindset comes into play, because you know your stuff well and you're able to create solutions accordingly. So once again, please, let's work on some projects, and let's all talk about the projects that we're working on, and let's document the projects. I even want to start, I want to make it cool to send each other our, topology blueprints. And this is something that I see on the internet anyway. When I Google certain solutions, or I Google something that I'm curious about, I see people sending on forums. Like, these are old forums, so maybe like 10 years ago, maybe 8 to 10 years ago, where people are asking for the command line configurations to help somebody else with the project that they're working on. But I want to do that within the context of like Discord groups and social media and things of that nature. If you want to see other vlog rants or even study tips, click right here, and I'll talk to you guys next time.